size. You can show the sprite, which is already shown at this point. You can also hide the sprite. Now this is interesting because now you can have hidden sprites that the end user cannot see. But if they're still inside the storyboard, or they're still on the stage, in other words, they can still detect stuff and have interaction with something else, but the user cannot see it. You can go to the front, you can go to the back by one layer, which means when you have multiple sprites overlapping, you can choose which one is on top of which other one, which can come in handy. Over here we have sounds. Okay, the first bubble says, play sound meow. So despite the package asked me to install the more updated version of Pulse Audio, it works just fine with the older version of Pulse Audio. And you can also look at the drop-down list here. It includes, you can also record your own, okay? And you can have your own library of, soundtracks. In other words, you can really put together a simple-minded game using this engine. Okay, what type of game you want to play is entirely up to you. There are many types of games you can put together in just a little bit. I programmed the most complicated one I have programmed is Hangman. Okay, it's not as easy as it seems. Okay, I know most of you think Hangman. I mean, how hard can it be to program it in a Scratch environment? It's actually a little more complicated because you have to match the characters, with the word that is being guessed, and then you have to remember which ones have been guessed already, and keeping count on how many times the player has guessed the word. So it's actually more complicated than it seems, but it can be done. It can be done. You can also You can play drum for 0.2 beats. Okay, let's try that. That's kind of cool. Okay. Play note 60, and you can choose which key to play. So 60 appears to be middle C for 0.5 beats. Wow, that is loud. Did you guys see that speaker just kind of creep forward on its own? Let's do it again. It is cool. Just cover your ears and. You guys have heard about the jogging, dryer or washer. This is creepier. We have just found a new mode of locomotion. Okay, so you can also change the volume so it's not as loud and so on and so forth. Most of these are new, okay, at least to the Linux version. Most of these are new because the previous version does not support sound at all. And this makes it a lot more fun because now you have the visual, and you also have the multimedia, or at least the sound, the audio to go with it. You can change the tempo, which means anyone who is more interested in actually playing a tune, can now change the tempo. You can make your Happy Birthday song go slower or faster, or make it depend on the user interaction. Make it faster and slower as the user do different things. Okay. You can have pen. Now this is also interesting. The pen is basically saying, is the sprite dragging a pen behind it? Okay, that's what it's controlling. So we have several things here. We have pen up and pen down. In other words, you can have the sprite to lift the pen so it does not leave a trail of color behind it, or you can have the sprite to drop the pen, so wherever it goes, it will leave a trail. Okay, it will basically, you can use it to draw pictures on the stage. You can change the pen shade by a certain degree. You can change the pen size. You can definitely change the color as well. So when you change the color, it gives you the entire selection of colors to change too. You can also do that in software. Okay, when you run the program, it gives you a way to change the color when you run the program. So that's kind of interesting because you can paint a rainbow if you want to. But the most important part is the orange tab. Okay, the other stuff is kind of cool. When you click on one, it does that one thing. But without the yellow stuff, okay, all it is doing is just you press one thing, it does that one thing, but it doesn't run as a program. The yellow tab gives you all the control elements. In other words, this is how you put a program together. This is how you can say, if this sprite runs to the edge, make it stop and make it, say, ouch. Okay? Or you can make it, the sky is the limit. Well, not quite, but you can do a lot of stuff with, Scratch already, just using all the constructs that are supported here. So we'll come back and take a look at control later on. The light blue or the sky blue, sensing tab gives you the ability, or give a sprite the ability to detect whether it's touching something. Now, because I don't have any other sprites, it only gives me two options at this point. I can ask the sprite and say, are you touching the mouse pointer? It will return either true or false. Or I can ask, is the sprite touching one of the edges? And then once again, it will return either true or false. Okay? So that's kind of useful because now we can program the sprite to move forward, every, say, 2.2 seconds or so, but it will stop and do something else once it gets to the edge of the screen. We can ask whether it's touching a particular color. Instead of asking whether it's touching an object, you can draw certain things on the stage, and then you can ask the sprite, are you touching something of that color? You can have the sprite to ask a question. Okay? In this case, it is not just a speech bubble. It also gives you a text box to enter something. You can enter anything. It really doesn't matter at this point because nothing is capturing whatever I'm typing here. But this gives the program a way to interact with the end user, and the end user can now actually type something. Okay? In other words, what you can do is you can have the sprite to ask a question. Okay? Answer 1 if you want to do this, answer 2 if you want to do this, answer 3 if you want to do this, and the user can just type either 1, 2, or 3 in the text box, press the enter key, and now you have a good old-fashioned adventure game. Right? And you can also design different stages too. The bitmap of the stage is programmable. So you can literally run or program a simple adventure game, using Scratch. It's not going to be like a first-person, 3D type, but it's still going to be fun. Because you have control over what the program is going to do. You can ask, where's the mouse at this point? Mouse X and mouse Y. They're both negative values because they are relative to the stage itself. My mouse is all the way over here, and that's why they're all the way negative to the other side. Yep.
Can you change the size of the stage, or do you just have to add more stages?
You cannot change the size of the stage, unfortunately. At least I have not figured out how to do that yet.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you want a bigger stage, you just have to add more of them.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
It's not really designed to be a very flexible and powerful programming environment. It's really supposed to be a introductory type of environment for people to get interested in programming. But I think they did a fairly good job, for a introductory type of environment. You can click mouse down is saying is the button on the mouse down. In other words, you can detect if you drag something on the stage, the program can detect it. Okay. You can also ask whether a particular key is being pressed, and in this case, you can detect any one of these keys or even more. Okay, you can detect a down arrow key, up arrow key, and so on and so forth, which means you can put together a simple game where you control the motion of the sprite by using the keys. Okay. I think someone can probably write Mario Brothers using this. The scrolling part is a little hard to do, so you have to kind of change by entire stages. But you can probably do it. You can have the sprite to detect it's about to jump off, the edge of one stage, and you can load the next stage, move the sprite all the way to the other side, and continue the game. You can also measure or have it to tell you the distance to something. So at this point, it can only detect, the distance to the mouse pointer, but it will tell you it is 3 750.9 pixels. Okay, and that's the distance from the mouse pointer itself to the sprite. Okay, and this comes in very handy. That would be, I don't know, that's a good question. I think it's relative to the center of the sprite. You can have a timer. This is also something that's new. The previous program does not have a timer concept. A timer is basically just like a timer, a physical timer, like the ones that you use in the kitchen. You set it and forget it until it rings, right? It's exactly the same thing here. When the timer runs out, it will trigger an event, and then you can specify what to do when the timer runs out of time. You have operators. Now these are things that most of these things are things that we know already. You have the addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. You can compare values. You have less than, equal to, greater than. You have the logical operators and, or, not. And then you can join two strings into one. If you join hello and world, it becomes a single string, which is hello world. Okay? It doesn't seem to be very useful, but it is very useful if a part of your output has a component that is determined at runtime. When you run the program, it determines what it wants to say. Then this construct is very useful because it can put together sentences dynamically on the fly, and your program has full control over the entire output in this case. It can also figure out what is the first letter of a particular thing. In this case, it's just world. So the letter 1 of world is W. Okay. The length of world is 5 because it has 5 letters, 5 characters in it. And then the other more important part is the variables. Okay. In other words, how do I keep track of the score if you want to write a game? Okay. You have to use a variable. A variable is nothing more than a little slip of paper that you can write it with a value and overwrite it over time. And hence the name variable, because the value can change over time. So are we doing okay so far with the different tabs of Scratch? Okay. So before we do anything else, before the end of this class, I'll just put together a very simple one just so that you guys can see how easy it is to put together a program. I will start with control, and I will start with this tab, this construct here. It says when the green flag is clicked. Okay. Basically, it triggers the execution of the entire program whenever I click this little green flag here. The next thing I would do is I will specify, have the sprite to just walk forward until it hits an edge, and then I want to make it to go meow and stop and say ouch using the speech bubble and stop the program. Okay, that's all I wanted to do at this point. Okay, which seems really simple, right? And it is. So I have to select one of these things here that has a little kind of arrow going back up again. Okay, I know it's kind of hard. Actually, it is. It shows better on this screen than on my screen. This little arrow that goes back up, this arrow that goes back up, means that these are quote-unquote loops. In other words, I can do the same thing again and again. Now, in some cases, like the forever, it means that it won't stop. Okay, it will never stop. It will keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. Other ones will stop depending on different factors. Repeat, and this is a count. It means that I only want to do something a certain number of times, and that's one certain number is predetermined. In this case, using the default value, it will do whatever is inside this construct 10 times, and I can put anything I want inside that. Basically, whatever I put inside, it will do it 10 times. I can use forever if, which means I want to do this forever as long as this condition is true. Once that condition becomes false, then I get out.